Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad, here for gonna be another incredible discussion on intelligent masculinity with someone who I've had the distinct pleasure of meeting a couple times now and getting to speak with is Qasim Rashid Esquire. Welcome, Qasim. Do you mind introducing yourself to everyone in the audience as we start coming on in here? We're on Substack, YouTube, Twitch, and Substack, YouTube, and Twitch today. So welcome everyone with us. And Qasim, could you introduce yourself for everyone in the audience today?
Nick, great to be here, man. Thank you for the invite and for the conversation. My name is Qasim Rashid. I'm a human rights lawyer. I am the creator of Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid on Substack. And if you want to subscribe, would love to have your support there as well. I cover all things human rights and provide calls to action on how to fight back against the fascism we're facing today.
It's your work spoke to me because of the focus on community and the human rights aspect, and we've gotten to talk a couple times now about the genocide that's going on in Israel and Palestine and the mass slaughter that is going to be just paved over with new Gaza, on the death of millions and millions of people just on blood-soaked soil, and it's a topic that's really tough because I've had to deconstruct my Judaism, and what it means to be of Jewish descent in a time when Abrahamic fascism, specifically Jewish and Christian fascism, are really prevalent. And I wanted to get your thoughts a little before we go in on, especially now that we're seeing more and more of what's going on in the Epstein files and how it relates to Israel and Russia and those influences, is what are your thoughts on this picture and how it's starting to come together as the US has been taken over by either Russia or Israel or both, and that leverage is allowing for a genocide in Israel at the moment?
When I talk to my Jewish friends and I see the ones who are combating and working hard to oppose this genocide, they're doing it because they're leaning into their Jewish values. And I think it's so important to point that out, that Jewish values condemn genocide. Jewish values promote humanity and justice and equal access under the law. And so I hear you say deconstructing Judaism, and you get to define what that means. I would hope that part of that meaning is really recognizing that the teachings of Judaism implore humanity, implore unity, and recognize and embrace diversity and representation. And throughout history, we see this really powerful alliance between Muslims and Jews, dating all the way back to the Constitution of Medina in 622 AD. That was between the Muslims and the Jews, and with Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, as the head of state. Article 17 of that constitution, which is a secular constitution, by the way, 1,200 years before the US Constitution, this was a secular constitution. And Article 17 stated explicitly, no Jewish person shall be wronged for being a Jewish person. And to me, that says volumes about, one, the prevalence of anti-Semitism even then, and two, about the firm embodiment of combating anti-Semitism that was infused in the Muslims at the time as well. So that, to me, is a history that we need to lean into. And as I see what's happening today in Gaza, in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, it has nothing, in my view, to do with religion at all. In fact, it's the violation of religious teachings. It is the abandonment of religious teachings that's enabling this. And the return to justice and humanity, I think, requires us to return to these core principles of recognizing the equality of humanity. That's the way I think about that. That's how I've found a community with my Jewish friends, my Christian friends, my atheist friends, that at the end of the day, faith or no faith, this basic element of humanity among all people is sacred. It cannot be violated, and we can't expect it to be self-enforcing either. We need to enforce it with our actions and our words. And that's, again, why these kinds of conversations are happening because I'm grateful to partake in conversations with leaders like you in this space too.
Thanks. And I'm so glad that you said that so eloquently, just in general, because it's easy to forget how our faith is different than, like, I'm agnostic to atheist, but I'm culturally Jewish. And I understand there's a difference because genetically I have a lot of markers that tie me back to tribal groups in Israel. And so I know that my family's from there. Um, and but our ties were always the teachings of my mom and dad. My mom specifically, in terms of the Jewish side, always taught never again was for all people. And that meant we never allow these types of horrendous actions that have been done upon us to be done upon others. And I took that to heart. And I think when I said deconstructing Judaism, I think I really mean deconstructing Israel from the heart of what it means to be Jewish.
Yeah.
And you do a lot in helping see those differences without having to. I know you're very anti-APAC. I'm very anti-APAC as well, but you don't always like focus in on that is the sole component of it. You talk about the humanity around it and how people are more alike than we are different. Um, and that's always really like that's stuck with me a lot. And I appreciate the work that you're doing in the space too, because it's way more important in the long run than the work that I'm doing. Mine is recapturing masculinity. Yours is capturing humanity and helping serve it on a legal basis. And I find that really like
Well,
laudable.
there's a lot of overlap, right? I mean, this is the point,
Yes.
right? There's a lot of overlap in that, and I've used this analogy before. I can't remember the thought leader who shared this with me the first time, but it's like a chorus, right? They can hold a note for 10 minutes because not everyone is singing for all 10 minutes. They're taking breaks in between while other people sing. And
Yeah.
I'm talking humanity, you're talking on masculinity. These are both important notes that we need to hit consistently, and that only happens if we work together.
I love it. And so this is going to be an incredible discussion. So I want to try and so to normally, y'all, you know me, I ramble. We get guest rambling for our discussions. This is the Intelligent Masculinity series where I'm asking and bringing on some men that I have met, specifically right now, men that I have met because men are the problem at the moment, more so than anyone else. Men, and it's a lot of it is due to men who look like me in America. We are a primary issue. White men are a primary issue in America. We have to admit that because we're the most, we just are. We're the problem and we need fixing. And that fixing requires us to be whole people. And to be whole people, we need to understand others and other places and other cultures and other identities. And we can't just think white because that's what's gotten white people into the problem is thinking just about themselves. And so part of this is me finding men who I have now have so much respect for online. I've never met Qasim in person. I've never met Bobby Jones in person. I've never met Marlon Weems. I've never met Lawrence Winterman. I've never met Walter Ryan. I've never met any of the folks that I've really interviewed in person. But forming these relationships has been so invaluable because it's taught me so many great lessons for myself on how to be a better father and a better man and a better husband purposely because I want to grow, but unintentional lessons. And so I'm excited to see what lessons I can get from Qasim in his journey and exploration into manhood and masculinity and how he's grown and gotten to this point. So Qasim, welcome to Intelligent Masculinity. I'm going to be asking you a couple questions here, four main starting points, and then we get into our fun
Great.
final questions around Mulan's theme song for I'll Make a Man Out of You, which I was a choir kid growing up, so the choir reference of singing overlapping voices continuously for 10 minutes works, makes sense, because a choir is many voices singing together and someone can take a breath and you'll never know. And that breath is really needed. And part of that is the Mulan, I'll Make a Man Out of You, clarion call for men, our call to action, which is our Let's Go Girls for men, because women have their own clarion call to action. We get ours too. And this one has some fun lessons in it that I like sharing and getting really interesting answers out of from people. So let's get into it, Qasim.
Good.
Our first question is a two-parter, and this one is fun. I've found has some. We get to go really deep, and your answer does not have to be for either one of these. Does not have to be a positive influence. It can be a negative one too, because both are equally powerful. But I found the positives always tend to give us a really cool look forward. So my question is, who has been one of the most influential masculine figures in your life?
Does it have to be somebody living, or like someone who's inspired
No,
me? Anybody? I mean, for me, the answer has to be the founder of Islam, Prophet Muhammad. When I think about masculinity, I think about just a comprehensive, well-rounded individual, somebody who exhibited physical strength, mental strength, emotional strength, spiritual strength, and he embodied all four of those. Everything from being courageous and standing up to those who would oppress marginalized communities, to defending the rights of women, to do something as thoughtful as when his daughter Fatima would enter a room, he would stand up, kiss her hands, and give her his seat. This is what I was taught about what being masculine is growing up. And it's something that has stayed with me throughout my entire life. And now I've got this amazing 10-year-old daughter of my own who simultaneously scares the hell out of me and also reminds me of how I need to treat her and elevate her. And so that's my answer to that. I can go deeper, but that's a very short answer to that question.
no, go deeper, please. I'd love to know more about that and how it's really influenced decisions you've made throughout life and grown. Because that's not the, and we've never gotten an answer like that. You're the first one who has gone that deep, either historically or religiously for themselves. We've had some answers around like cultural figures
Sure.
and like civil rights leaders who, but this is really the first answer for from a religious side. And I I'll say this: I tend to bash some religions, but
By all
not.
means.
I don't bash people of the religions for the most part. I
Yeah.
bash the what makes people bad about, or what makes the bad parts about it, the exploitative parts. But I really love knowing more about where people learn the incredible values from out of it.
Hmm.
Because if a religion makes you a better person, it's a good religion. It's
Yeah.
a good view of that religion. And I have no problems with that, because if it helps make you a better person, then that's amazing. And so I'd love to know what your like a deeper
Yeah.
look into that
Happy
on
to.
how the Prophet Muhammad has influenced your life and what directions it's given you to be who you are today.
I mean, especially on this issue of masculinity, I think this is such an important topic because there's so much disinformation about him. And it's unfortunate because when you actually study his life from authentic scholars, not just mean Muslim scholars, I mean, there are plenty of non-Muslim historians that have written about him in detail. Stanley Lane Poole, Alfonso de Lamartine. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Karen Armstrong. Um, uh, uh, Michael Wolff. I mean, the list is literally endless. So if you don't trust Muslim scholars, study the non-Muslim historians, and you find a very consistent theme of a person who exemplified what it meant to be a good human. And it's important to paint the picture of Arabia at the time when he was born in 570 AD. This was a time where women had no rights, none whatsoever. Women were treated as property. One common barbaric custom was that because it was so shameful to have a daughter, a common custom among the Arabs, and this is across religion, this is the pagans and Jews and Christians across the Arab custom, this is a cultural norm, was to bury that infant child alive because that was considered less shameful than having a daughter. And women had no right to choose who to marry. It was a very rare exception that you found a woman who had that kind of power. Certainly didn't have any rights to divorce. They were treated as property. Men could marry, dozens of women, hundreds of women, treat them as concubines. I mean, it was absurd. Women were a commodity, not human beings. And with the arrival of the Prophet, when he established this religion, the very first teaching in this space is a rejection of the notion that women are subservient to men. Women are not described as being made from the rib of Adam. Women and men are described as two beings created from the same soul, as equal partners. And that's actually how the Prophet advised men, as in his farewell address, that remember that women are your partners, your committed partners. By default, that's equal. And this notion that men hold some kind of superiority was also dismantled by pointing out that men and women will attain paradise at equal levels. They have the equal ability to attain God's nearness and to attain, elevation, God status. But then on a very practical level too, for the first time, women were not just allowed to get education, but in fact, the Prophet taught that education is incumbent upon every Muslim male and every Muslim female. It wasn't just this, idea that if you want to. No, it was actually incumbent. For the first time, women were not just allowed to choose who to marry, but it was forbidden that a woman be married without her explicit consent. In fact, Islam mandates that every woman has a legal, basically a lawyer to protect her rights in a marriage contract, because marriage is a contract. And so whereas men aren't afforded a lawyer, women are afforded a legal representative to ensure that all of her rights are met and protected. It's essentially a barrier so that should something go south, that legal representative can step in and protect her from a man who might be abusive. And we see today how much abuse women suffer at the hands of men. I mean, this concept was revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
That women went from being property to now having an actual lawyer protect their rights and to make sure that they weren't being shafted. Men were obliged to give a dowry, to give a financial guarantee to ensure women's financial safety and security. Because as we know, one of the main reasons women are unable to leave abusive relationships is because they don't have financial support. Now, upon marriage, a man was obliged to provide financial security, and that's typically determined to be 6 months of his annual salary, to ensure that that's a gift from him to her that she has, that's exclusively hers. And then the financial conditions don't stop there. If a woman works, 100% of her income is her own, and a man has zero responsibility or right over any of that income, but she has equal rights and say over his income. I mean, and the list just goes on and on. And so to me, growing up, realizing that this was what masculinity looks like, it had a deep and personal impact on me. That this wasn't just some theory pie in the sky. This was actual legislative enforcement. This was a requirement upon men. And then we talk about how, the West has liberated women so much. My God, I just shared some of the financial rights afforded to women 1,400 years ago. It was only in 1974 that the Equal Credit Opportunity Act was passed, and women finally got equal access to finances and credit. 1,400 years prior, Islam had guaranteed those rights to women. The Prophet Muhammad had guaranteed those rights to women. No-fault divorce wasn't legalized until the 20th century. It was guaranteed 1,400 years ago in Islam. Inheritance wasn't permissible to women until the 19th century. 1,400 years ago, women were guaranteed to receive inheritance. Education. I mean, we hear about, so-and-so woman was the first woman to graduate from Harvard. As I just shared, the Prophet established that education was a guarantee, an incumbent obligation upon women 1,400 years ago. Right now, there's a debate about whether women should serve in the armed forces. There were Muslim women warriors 1,400 years ago. There's a debate about whether women should become doctors, as it was in the 19th century. Women were the nurses and doctors in the battlefields as well 1,400 years ago. And so to me, the true tragedy of all this is the amount of disinformation out there about what this masculinity actually looks like, what true masculinity actually is, as exemplified by the Prophet Muhammad. The whole podcast, by the way, could be me talking about this and giving example after example. But hopefully
this is really cool
context as well.
This is really awesome. I'll say I am ignorant on the history of the Prophet Muhammad. I didn't learn a lot about him, and I haven't learned a lot about him. And this has been really informative, like understanding these. And I've gone to Afghanistan. Like, I've been to the Middle East. I was deployed out there. We were asked and made sure that we learned about the culture that we were going into, and I took that seriously. I was in an intelligence unit. Like, that's my job, was to talk to people. So I needed to at least know who I was talking to and what I was talking about on a basic level. But this opens my eyes to a world that I didn't learn about. And I think it also changes. You were talking about dowries. It changes the view and the context on what a dowry is, in comparison to what I've been taught is more of, it's like a purchase price, was what I was always had the idea of a dowry of, is this is me basically buying your daughter, and or this is how it's always been presented. But you're presenting it as the teachings of, this was to ensure that the woman had financial security on her own, separate from her husband, maybe provided because of her husband or by her husband, but it was hers to keep. And it
Exclusive.
wasn't his in any way. And that opens my eyes to like what that could be or should be, or how that would look. Um, and I would love to spend a whole episode just discussing this, but we have some more questions that I want to get into, because I
Yeah.
don't want to lose the opportunity to talk about all the other aspects of masculinity with you. And I think we should have another discussion on this, because this is really amazing, and I'd love to learn more. And I think more people would benefit from understanding true histories and understanding true teachings, because like you said, and like we said, I've said many a times, maybe not here, is religion itself isn't the problem. It's the people who are teaching the religion in a context that is exploitative that are the problem.
Yeah.
And I think we can all benefit and learn from many religions. Even if you aren't practicing them, you can benefit and learn from them. And I would love to have a really in-depth discussion on that, if you'd be open to that at some time.
Yeah.
Awesome. So the second part of this question, one of the biggest things I've found about masculinity for myself and through these discussions is, we need both masculine side of the spectrum figures, and we need folks across the whole spectrum of masculine to feminine. But we always have key like feminine figures in our lives too, who lean heavily on the feminine side of what we would classify as emotions, because we use gendered emotions for some reason, even though everybody gets to feel them. They're human, they're people emotions, but we classify them that way because, society. So in your life, who has been one of the most influential feminine figures, and why? And again, can be anyone throughout history, doesn't have to be living, or it doesn't have to be living, and could be for positive or negative reasons.
I think one answer is, I would consider the Prophet to be a feminist as well, because of the way he championed women's rights and elevated women. But again, I think just going through history, kind of the core exemplars that we see, there's many I can point to. One is Mary, mother of Jesus, that I can point to. The Quran calls her as the most exalted woman of her time, because this was a person who faced accusations against her character and her integrity, but stayed true to her values and her principles. This is a person who was effectively a single mother, and we see how society demonizes single mothers and single women, and she still rose to the occasion to be, as Muslims believe, the mother of the Christ, of the Messiah, Jesus. And I say this not to be evangelical or to preach. I say this to point out that she faced so many of the social taboos and ills that still plague society today. And she remained firm and steadfast and strong and courageous. And now she's honored and remembered and recognized for her bravery and for her conviction and for her consistency and steadfastness and for her faith. I think that, to me, must be celebrated. The courage that she exemplified is something that I wish I one day aspire to achieve a fraction of. The other woman that also comes to mind is Khadija, who was the wife of the Prophet. Now, this is a remarkable woman throughout history, because, in marrying the Prophet, that experience broke so many taboos. For example, she was one of the few women at the time who was actually wealthy. She was the CEO of a thriving trading business. And she had been married not once, but twice before she married the Prophet. And in fact, she had children from her previous marriages as well. And so you have a woman who is financially independent, a woman who's been married twice, a woman who has children, all qualities that we are told today that if a woman has these qualities, you don't want to marry her. And then, far from our social norm of the man has to propose, she proposed to the Prophet. And she did so when she was 15 years older than him as well. And so again, another taboo that you shouldn't marry older women, or women who are older or not of breeding age, whatever nonsense people spew out there. But she broke that taboo. The Prophet broke that taboo. And they had a beautiful, lasting marriage that lasted 25 years until, 28 years until her untimely death due to the persecution that the early Muslims faced. And again, like, she exemplified courage and steadfastness and demonstrated that you can be a thriving CEO of a successful business, and you can be a wife and a mom, and there's no contradiction between the two. And she did this at a time when all these things were considered to be taboo, but she broke those taboos and led by example to kind of exemplify what feminism actually is. It's, in my view, basically saying, I'm going to live the life that makes my family happy, that makes me happy, and do so unapologetically as a full human being, living my best life, living my full values without compromising anything. I think that's a powerful example. And so, as I think about the world I want to create for my daughter, we have three amazing kids. Our two older ones are boys, and our youngest is a girl. And like, when she bullies them and they complain, I'm like, tough luck, suck it up. I'm not going to stop her. We're raising her in a world where men are terrible. And so if she can get a head start on bullying men and telling them to shut up and sit down, I am for it 100% of the way.
Oh, 100%. I've got a son and a daughter. My daughter's my older, and she puts my son and her friends into their places when they need it. And she's witty and sarcastic and quick, and because I was taught those things. Yep. So why wouldn't I want my daughter to have the same tools to come back at people with witty, quick, fun responses and be blunt? I love this. This is so amazing. And also, I don't know if you're following the Substack chat at all, is the feedback is really wonderful towards what you're talking about. And you are expanding the minds of so many of us here, because you've taken, like I said, a very different historical take than others. And this is why I really love these conversations. Like, you're the first one who's gone in this direction, and it's amazing because it's a very human-based description of these historical figures that people talk about in as cliche as it will sound, is in godly ways, but they never talk about them as a person, and like the person ways and how they lived human lives. And it's amazing to hear like the difference in those lives for folks back in the day. Like, women having rights seems to be this cyclical thing that we keep trying to tread upon. And I'm hoping that we are finally at a point where we can push back and end the oppression of those rights, like once and for all, and just agree that people deserve rights because we're all people.
Well, Nick, I mean, like, one of the reasons why these examples that I've given inspire me so much is because they're practical. It's because they're a proven model. It's not just this theory pie in the sky, like, I think women should have equal rights, or maybe what if women were allowed to marry whoever they wanted? Like, it's not this hypothetical thing, right? This is exemplified. This is personified. And it's demonstrated in a sustainable way over centuries. Fatima al-Fihri was an African Muslim princess who used her father's inheritance to establish Al-Qaroun University, which is the world's oldest sustained university. It was established 600 years before Harvard University, and it sustains to this day. And so you want to talk about breaking taboos. You're talking about an African Muslim princess who used money from her father's inheritance to build the world's oldest sustainable educational institution that provided education to the scholars at the time. And so that's what I mean when I say that this is not just for me like some thought exercise of wouldn't it be nice. These examples inspire me and I share them, and you can see the passion in my voice. It's coming from a place of, hey, this is a proven model. This actually works. And so if it works, irrespective of race, religion, culture, gender, greed, like, why not apply it? Why not talk about it? Why not disseminate it? And I'm not looking at the chat, but I'm glad that people are responding well to it.
Yeah. And it's good to just better human and see these examples throughout history where there were people who tried, who really did for their time, were way ahead of what we thought was acceptable for their time. Yet we're now learning maybe we were wrong. Maybe it's just these rights were there and we took them away. And it's time we stop doing that. And it's time, especially as men, we push back actively in our practices and how we do that. And so one of those things that have done so far and trying to continue to do through this series is refine a thesis that I have on what intelligent masculinity, the definition of it is. And I want to get your thoughts before I give you mine, so I don't give you any bias on it. Is what would you define, or what does intelligent masculinity mean to you?
It's a very open-ended question. I think intelligent masculinity requires the ability to separate yourself from your ego and really understand why you respond to a certain thing the way you do. I don't think any of us are simply the default result of random atoms and molecules colliding, and this is just the way we are. I think we choose how we respond, how we behave in certain situations. We all get road rage. We all feel that anger and rage rising when our spouse says something that we just don't like or disagree with, or somebody we care about who knows how to push our buttons definitely pushes our buttons. But how we respond to that, I think, requires us to step out and say, well, why am I reacting this way? Would it be better if I just bit my tongue for now because I know I'm angry and everything sounds super logical when you're angry and justified, and just step back for a minute and just reflect on whether this really is the right way for me to address this. And I think so many of the problems that we see with men today could be addressed if men just took a second to shut up and sit down and reflect, is this really the right way? And have the humility and the intelligence to just shut up for a second and say, you know what, maybe just not acting right now out of the rage that I feel is a good thing. Let me revisit this tomorrow or an hour from now, or let me just get a drink of water and just relax for a minute and respond. So I think I would define it as the ability to reflect on why you feel certain emotions that might be destructive, and be able to pause and reflect on isolating the source of that anger before responding, so that if your anger truly is justified, it's a response not out of anger, but out of thoughtful contemplation, as opposed to just like raw rage and power.
I love that. That'll add into the definition that I've put together. So let me give you my thesis I will color some of your answers, and hopefully it'll impact how maybe the conversation goes, but also how you think about it too in the long run. Is I've been able to boil it down to intelligent masculinity is the refusal to outsource accountability onto others and the discipline to live with the consequences of our actions and values.
I love it.
And you said it in your answer too, is that ability to stop, and that ability, the mindful ability, the tools to just have emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, to stop for a second and ask ourselves before we get to the point of doing something destructive, is this the right thing to do? Should
Yeah,
I do this? Is this wrong?
love it.
And it's amazing. I'm so glad your definition fits into that. It's wonderful to hear that everyone so far has also wrapped right around or in that definition vein. Um, and yeah, for those in the chat too, Elizabeth, our friend Elizabeth Raven just said, "Is the advice is valid for women too?" Yeah, this is a discussion for better humaning and for all people to be able to understand, from men, women, others, any with trans, gay, straight, whatever, androgynous, non-sex, asexual, whatever you are, whoever you are, whatever you are. I don't care. I'm in the I don't care because your life is yours and you want to live it, and I want to let you live it. It's not the I don't care of I don't care about you. It's I don't care because I want to be left alone too. I don't want you to have to come out every day and explain yourself and your humanity. I want you to have the same values or rights and freedoms that I do. Um, and I think it's powerful to see that a lot of us men who are in this space, who are doing the hard work right now, all seem to fit around this definition and really well with this definition. Um, and so the next question is, how do you model these definitions of intelligent masculinity in your own life?
I'm extraordinarily fortunate that I have an amazing spouse, my wife Aisha, who keeps me in check and keeps me honest. So I'm very lucky there. Um, and I'm fortunate that I've had great teachers to kind of guide and mentor me. And so I try to exemplify that a number of ways, most often through self-reflection, but then also, you know, just shutting up and listening to my wife on areas where I know I'm out of my league, and being able to take her advice. And I think one of the most important things is to be able to find that person that you can trust, that you can be vulnerable to, and trust for their advice and guidance, and be able to move forward there. And I hesitate to give too long of an answer here because I don't want to give the impression that I'm patting myself on the back. I'm be the first one to admit that I have a long way to go to do better and to improve more. And so it might be a better question to ask my wife or to women in general in my life of whether I'm living up to these values. But for me, it's that constant self-reflection and listening to mentors, teachers, my spouse, and being able to make those corrections where people point out, hey, you got to do better on this.
So I want to dig into one of the areas there before we go into self-reflection and self-evaluation, because that's actually the next question, which primes it up really well. But you talked about this idea, and so you talked about the women in your life, and how they are a part of your self-correction tooling and your mechanisms for self-evaluation and reevaluation. One and looping it into this idea of not outsourcing your own accountability onto them is, how do you ensure when you're listening to the women in your life or others in your life who are providing, your mentors, folks like that, who are providing these corrections or feedback to you, is how do you ensure that when you do that, you're not forking over the load of your emotions onto them, and that you're keeping your emotional boundaries in check to protect their sanctity and their personhood?
Yeah, I think it really just comes back to having an understanding of what those boundaries should be. I mean, I think the best definition of boundaries that I've ever heard is boundaries aren't meant to block people out. They're meant to interact with people in a way that's sustainable. And I know what my boundaries are with the people in my life, because I always err on the side of never crossing a boundary. I mean, I'll give you like one really good example of this. I was at an event a few months ago, and was showing my son pictures of the event. And he noticed that whenever I was in a group photo with women, my hands were visible. And he's like, "Why are you putting your hands out like that?" I'm like, "Because I want people to know where my hands are in a photograph at all times. And I want there to be no doubt as to where my hands are. Not because I'm distrusting of people, not because I'm distrusting of the person that I'm standing next to, but because I just want there to be no doubt as to what my boundary is. And my boundary is I don't touch people. I don't. If somebody gives explicit, clear consent for a handshake or a hug, that's a different conversation. But if I meet somebody new, I'm not going to cross that boundary. That's insane to me. That's absurd to me. And it just so happened at the same event, there was a sexual assault that took place because somebody didn't respect boundaries and crossed a line, and harmed another woman, somebody who's a friend of mine, somebody that I care deeply about. And so, to me, this is actually something that men fail at horribly. And it's such an easy pass fail. Just keep your damn hands to yourself. Keep your eyes to yourself. This is not a complicated thing. This is not like, we're not asking you to defuse a bomb with 17 seconds left and there's 46 wires, you can cut only one. Like, this is not that complicated. This is, have the boundary of keep your hands and your eyes to yourself. It's a very simple concept. There's actually, going back to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, there's a very famous story where he was riding on his horse or something, and his cousin was sitting behind him. And this authenticated, documented story is that a woman approached the Prophet to ask him some questions about Islam. And she's described as an extraordinarily beautiful woman. And as you know, Muslim women, they wear the hijab, they cover their head. Her head was not covered. She was not wearing any kind of hijab, any kind of headscarf whatsoever. And so she's asking the Prophet this question, and he's answering the question. And the Prophet looks behind him and he notices that his cousin is gawking. It's just like staring at this woman, like just mesmerized by her beauty. Now, what did he do? Because what he did next really, to me, exemplifies the answer to your question here. He reached back and he grabbed his cousin's face and he turned it away. He didn't tell the woman, why are you dressed like that? He didn't scold her that, look what you've done. You've made him look at you and gawk at you. He didn't say, by dressing like that, you're inviting men to harm you. He said nothing to her about how she was dressed. Didn't so much as scoff or cringe. He simply answered her questions as an equal human being, and treated her as she deserved to be treated. And he physically restrained his cousin to say, hey, you have no right to treat her like that. Look away, respect the boundary, and have some decency. So to me, that's a very simple answer. And guess what? That is 1,000% in men's control. That doesn't require women to do anything. It's 1,000% in men's control. And when men tell me that they struggle with that, to me, it speaks to what's wrong with our society today, because that's not something you should struggle with. Keeping your hands and your eyes to yourself is not something you should struggle with. It's a very simple pass-fail test, and the men who fail at, shame on them.
100%, 1,000% agree. Like, I have a son, even if I didn't, like, I'm a man. I know I've lived that side. It's really not that hard to keep your hands and eyes to yourself. It's easy to look people in the eye. It's easy if you're uncomfortable with looking people in the eye. You can tell them, hey, I'm uncomfortable looking you in the eye. Yeah. I'm going to be looking in this, maybe look in a different direction slightly.
Yeah.
You just don't make people uncomfortable. Like, respect. I'm so glad you said respecting boundaries. And I'm glad we went into this part of the conversation, because that's a huge piece of it right now and it's something I taught my son, and I'd love to, with knowing that you have both boys and girls, is I taught my son, and I'm teaching, and we taught our daughter too, is everything but yes means no. And I'd love your thoughts on like that idea in terms of a boundary, especially with the culture that we have today. And speaking on the boundaries are different by culture. Absolutely. A lot of cultures, kissing on the cheek is like the acceptable and the appropriate greeting for each other, or giving hugs. Some cultures, they're not. And respecting the difference in that culture is really powerful. And understanding when it's appropriate to do those cultural greetings and not is also really powerful, so that we don't step on each other's cultures. So, but just going back to the question of everything but yes means no. love to hear your thoughts on that a little bit, and how that might fit into some of the teachings that you've passed on to your sons.
There's that's such a beautiful statement right there. There's, again, um, after the Prophet's wife Khadija died, he remarried, and there was an instance with the marriage ceremony is called the nikah ceremony, Nikkah, the second marriage contract. And there's a nikah ceremony, and then there's like consummation of marriage. And so, without getting into too much detail, there's a nikah ceremony that happened, and then they were going to consummate the marriage. And it's recorded that she said that I don't consent to this, and I don't want this marriage. And now, mind you, it's your wedding night, right? And your spouse that you just got married to says, I don't want this marriage. I don't consent to this. It would flabbergast men to be like, what are you talking about? What's happening? Like, why? How are we in this situation? And the Prophet Muhammad's response was, okay, accepted, and annulled the marriage immediately. And that was the extent of it. It wasn't any shaming. It wasn't any ridiculing. It wasn't, do you realize what you've done? It was, I accept. It was that simple and straightforward. And so even at that last possible moment, the message for men is no means no. And that's it. There's no debate about this. There's no, like, no is a complete sentence. And that's it. And that's all you should need. So I think this is exactly right. And I would even go a step further to ensure that every precaution is made in this situation. Because again, this is, once consent is violated, that's a bell that cannot be unrung. And this is why in the Quran, chapter 4, verse 20, it says in explicit terms that do not inherit women against their will. And the word inherit is the English word of it, but the Arabic lexicon goes deeper, that do not impose anything upon women against their will. And it's a complete sentence. There's no like interpretation or metaphorical meaning of it. It's a very straightforward sentence, open, close, that do not do it. There's no exceptions to this. And so I sound a little frustrated right now because I can't stand men who try to find a way that, oh, well, she was playing hard to get, or, well, no means yes, or, she smiled at me, so that indicated something. Or if she was really not interested, then why was she smiling at me when she's saying no? Well, probably because she's scared to death, and she hopes that if she smiles, she can convince you to leave her alone. But it goes back to the simple point that she wouldn't have to do all these things and try to find all these mind games to play if you just shut up and sit down and listen and leave when you hear the word no and realize that that's just enough.
Beautifully said. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I know my daughter and my son would appreciate those sentiments, because that's what like I said, that's what we're teaching them. And that's how all boys and all girls should be taught, and everyone in between should be taught, is anything but yes means no. A maybe isn't a yes. It's no until I say yes. And that's what maybe really means. So thank you for providing such a beautiful context to all of this. And I don't want to get too off topic, but this one has been nagging at me because I know there are two distinct variants of Islam, of Shia and Sunni.
There's more than two, but yeah, go on.
Oh, okay. So there's more than two, but those are the two that I know. Those,
yeah.
And I was going to say, from my understanding, these are the two that I have was taught around.
Yeah.
Are there distinct differences in any of these interpretations that you know from your learnings and all your practices and understandings of how either those two major sects or other major sects of Islam practice these inherent rights for women compared to each other?
Yeah, Muslims are not a monolith, and you'll find as many variations among Muslims as you will among Jews and Christians and what have you. My point, what I'm exemplifying, is based on my study and the proven model that I've seen today. One of the unique aspects of Islam is that, unlike other faiths, the Holy Scripture of Islam, the Quran, there's only one version. There's no two versions of the Quran. The Arabic is the exact same as it was revealed 1400 years ago. So even if you and I were to disagree on what a verse means, we can go back to the original Arabic lexicon and understand what it actually says. We're not debating like King James versus New Revised Version versus what have you. And that's huge, because at the end of the day, if you and I are trying to read a map and we're reading different maps, obviously we're going to get different results. But we're looking at the same map and we can decide based off of that. And so this is where there's this concept of this is why education is so important and why literacy is so important. Fun fact: the very first word of the Quran ever revealed is an Arabic word, "ikra," which means to read, to recite, to convey. And really, so the entirety of Islamic philosophy is to be immersed in reading and in conveying and in dialogue. And that's the beauty of it, that even when there are disagreements, we are able to find reconciliation. And I would argue that the positions that I've put forth are actually held by the vast majority of Muslims, regardless of sect, because these are really not theological points I'm bringing up. It's a very practical, humane issues bringing, the ability to have financial autonomy and consent and who to marry and when to divorce and, all these things. These are not theological debates. The differences really come into certain theological matters, but in terms of practicality and basic civil rights and human rights, there is very little difference. You have some extremist groups like you find in any faith group or any group out there, period. But by and large, I would say more than 99% would readily agree with what I just said today on this call.
Okay, awesome. That's really great to know, and it's cool to know the the historical differences in how we are able to translate back texts, and the fact that the Quran is a single document that isn't retranslated multiple times everywhere. So you don't have the missing links or the added documents or the added pages that maybe in the halls of underneath the halls in Rome and the Vatican. We don't know what all of the book of Christianity is because they're hiding parts of it. Whereas the Quran is open. I think that's really different.
I'll go a step further. In fact, Nick, I don't know if you know this, but we actually have original manuscripts of the Quran, original versions from 1400 years ago in museums in Istanbul, in the Topkapi Museum. So you can actually go and compare that Quran to the one I have sitting on my bookshelf behind me, and you'll find the Arabic is the exact same. And to go a step even further than that, millions upon millions of Muslims have memorized the Quran cover to cover, from the first word to the last, all 114 chapters. And they all trace their memorization back to the Prophet himself. They can all do that. And so not only do we have it written from that time, but we have it memorized from that time. And so even if somehow every Quran in the world were to disappear or to be burned or to be destroyed, every digital copy, every print copy, every manuscript, millions. I mean, I have 3 people in my own family that have memorized it cover to cover. They're called hufaz, which translates to protectors. They could all rewrite it from memory and have the exact same version. So it's really remarkable the way this scripture has been, preserved and protected throughout the ages.
It is, and that's a very different way of approaching it than others have taken, and it does keep the history alive in a very different way. It also fits in really well with the next question of self-reflection and self-evaluation, because in reading and rereading and memorizing a book from cover to cover, tales and history from cover to cover, or your religious documents from cover to cover, you have to be able to reflect on it. And in life, through masculinity, you reflect on it. As a human, you reflect on the actions you do. And you talked a lot about that. You talked about that earlier on. Self-reflection is a huge tool for yourself that you use. And I'd love for you to discuss about maybe 1 or 2 of the specific things that you do to self-reflect and self-evaluate that really work, that you'd love to be able to pass on to others to be able to use.
It's a beautiful question. I think as in Ramadan is starting, as an observant Muslim, you pray 5 times a day. And those 5 to 10, 15 minutes of self-reflection and meditation really do a lot for your mental health and for your ability to just detach from notifications and beeps and buzzes and pop-ups on your screen. Um, uh, it's done. People ask me how I keep kind of maintain my sanity. That's one way I maintain my sanity, by being able to just detach and just have quiet and just be able to just reflect. Um, there's a concept in Islam called jihad, which has again been maligned maliciously. But the true meaning of jihad means a struggle against evil, a struggle against injustice. And the Prophet described the greatest jihad as the struggle against the self that incites you to do wrong. And that winning that jihad is the most important. And that effectively is a constant self reflection. And so the constant self reflection that I'm called to do, is to recognize that I've got two responsibilities here on earth: service to God and service to humanity. And that my service to God is actually secondary to my service to humanity. It's actually insignificant and incomplete and irrelevant unless I first fulfill my service to humanity. And how do I fulfill my service to humanity? This is where we talk about: am I serving my neighbor? Is my neighbor going hungry? Am I making sure I'm giving charity to those who are less fortunate? Am I doing what I can with the privilege that I have, the male privilege, the lawyer privilege? I'm not some multimillionaire, but the means that I have to provide for the less fortunate, am I using that money privilege that I have? And if I am, then I'm on the right track. But at the end of the day, there's still people who are hungry out there. There's still people who are suffering from disease. There are still people who are suffering from poverty. And my responsibility, my self-reflection is: what more do I need to be doing to truly elevate those around me to a place of stability and decency? And so I'm not sitting here content that, okay, I've done enough now. In my view, and I think in the view of every Muslim, as long as people are still suffering from these preventable ailments of poverty and disease and hunger and sickness, our job's not done. And our self-reflection, our true jihad, calls on us to continue to struggle to elevate those around us. And until and unless we can do that, then we're failing on our responsibility. And our worship, our prayer actually becomes irrelevant if we're not fulfilling our first responsibility to take care of our neighbors as best as we possibly can. So that's kind of how I think about self-reflection. It's this constant battle of are you doing your best? Because we all know internally if we're doing our best, if we're working to our best ability, or am I slacking off? And if I'm slacking off, then I better get my butt in gear and do what I'm supposed to be doing. Because if I believe I'll be facing my creator one day, the last thing I want to face is a question of, I give you all these resources and you slacked off and played video games all day instead of actually taking care of your neighbor. That's not a question I want to be able to have to answer. So I'm doing my best to take care of them now.
I think that's really, really beautifully said, especially on the distinction of. Sorry, I have fiber, so I lose things. The reflection is a beautiful tool that we all get to use, and it's really wonderful that you are teaching this and like bringing it to its fullest extent to model yourself in positive ways and to grow from your experience. That was
Hey, you broke up a bit there, Nick. Can you hear me?
that. Sometimes it does that.
I
Everyone
think you're
can hear.
back. Yep.
Okay, I should be back. All right. So where I was you made the really big distinction of serving God and your creator and serving mankind. And then you made the very big distinction of going for mankind first as your primary objective. Like your service to yourself and your community around you is the primary objective. Can you explain why you think that in terms of like a God, in terms of like a faith, of why is it more important to serve mankind over God itself rather than God over mankind? Because we're facing that distinction in real time right now with a group, specifically Christian nationalists in America, who want to serve God over mankind, whereas you're saying it the other way around to get a similar result of I want to serve God, but you're doing it from a different angle. Can you explain that
Yeah,
difference and why it's
yeah.
significant to you?
From an Islamic perspective, there's no such thing as serving God without first serving mankind. There's no such thing. And I'll give an example from the life of the Prophet. He was asked by his companions. He was given the cases of two people. He goes, "There's one person who is well known for how much they fast and how much they pray and how much they worship, but they are extremely rude and negligent to their neighbor and insults them constantly." And the Prophet said that person will attain the hellfire. And said that there's a second person who is not particularly observant in their prayers and doesn't really ever come to the mosque and isn't particularly devout in their practice, but they always make sure that their poor neighbor has food and that the neighbor never goes hungry. And the Prophet said this person will attain paradise. And that's the point of what Islamic teachings are, that if you're not if religiosity means anything but being in a champion for your neighbor's humanity, then it's just a cult. Then you've missed the point completely. Then that has nothing to do with God. It has everything to do with your own personal ego. And that is the antithesis of what being a human being is supposed to be. And so everything that Islam teaches in this space is it boils down to service to God and service to humanity. And if service to humanity is not at the forefront, then it's just a fantastic waste of time. You're in a cult and you should get out as soon as possible.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. I cannot argue with it either. So yeah, and it fits into
I'll just add, sorry to cut you off, but I'll just add that there's no asterisks to humanity. So whether you agree with someone's personal faith or their moral living conditions or their life choices is irrelevant to their humanity. You can't be like, well, my religion says alcohol is wrong and this person's drinking alcohol, so I'm not going to help them. Like, that's insane. That's stupid. That's nonsensical. So I just want to emphasize, when we talk about helping humanity, we're talking about humanity without any asterisks whatsoever. It doesn't matter what that person is doing in their life. If they're a human being, that's the only qualifier, period, that obliges you to ensure that they have the basic humanity to live with dignity and live with self-respect. Sorry, I just needed to get that out of my system too.
No, I'm glad you got it out of your system. Yeah. And I want to make sure there's no misunderstanding. There was a question in the chat but male privilege over what there should be no male privilege. That is an ungodly assumption. So hopefully I misunderstood. I want to make sure too is the assumption of God in teaching in this humanity was never about men teach this or men practice this only. This is every person is the practice of world of others, community building over God first, of mankind as a whole, humankind as a whole, if we want to use the non-gendered version of it, is humankind as a whole over dedicated like visual faith, because the practice of actual faith is returning onto others, doing unto others as you want done unto you. On the Christian side, the golden rule as we know it is a lot of what you were just talking about.
I'll add on I said male privilege earlier. I want folks to understand what I mean by male privilege. And I first learned about male privilege probably when I was about 15 years old. And I remember, because I was, we grew up pretty low income, Section 8 housing, food stamps, the whole 9 yards. And I was working. At 15, I was working at a grocery store and, coming home at, 11 o'clock, midnight after the store closed. And I was also on the cross country and track team. And so there were days where after school, I'd have to go to work immediately, skip practice, go to work. And then I still had to run. So to get my practice, my miles in. And so I'd come home, and then at like midnight, I'd go running at midnight, as one does at 16 years old. And it sounds crazy now, but that's what I did. I'm like, yeah, I gotta get my run in.
Why not?
Let me go get my 10-mile run in right now. And so I'd run, I'd get home, and then, shower, go to bed, and wake up and go to school the next day. And I remember talking to a friend of mine, and she was complaining as well that she wasn't able to practice yesterday because she also had to go to work after school. And I said, well, why don't you just run after work? And she goes, well, I got done at like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, yeah, so just go running after you get home. And she goes, wow, you really are stupid, aren't you? And I was like, it just didn't occur to me why a teen girl couldn't go running at 10 o'clock at night. This is the 15, 16-year-old me. And that's when I realized that, oh, okay, this is what male privilege is, not having to worry about being sexually assaulted by going running at night. And so when I said male privilege earlier, that's what I meant, that men have in this society, they don't have that fear the same way women have that fear. And it's okay to acknowledge that, but acknowledging it obviously isn't enough. We also need to act to change that so that women feel as safe at night out in public as men do. And so just to be clear to anyone who's wondering, that's what I meant. It wasn't the privilege of being male. It was this element of explaining what I mean by male privilege.
Thanks for that clarification too. And these discussions are so wonderful because we get to actually dig into this and what it means about privilege and what we're trying to break down and rebuild and reclaim and do something new with. And so let's get into our final segment of this. Is our more whimsical part, is our Mulan, I'll make a man out of you, our clarion call to action. There's 4 lightning round questions. These are fun. They're a little bit more, like I said, whimsical, but I've always seen them as someone who's understood the physicality side of what they were trying to intend to you or emote for you in the movie, but also on the emotional side and on the intelligence side of how you actually look at things around you, because there's quite a bit of meaning in all of these little phrases. So broke it down. The chorus has 4 questions in it. Let's get into it. So to you, what would it mean to be as swift as a coursing river?
What would it mean to be swift as a coursing river? That's such a broad question. I am training for a marathon right now. And it's been a childhood dream of mine to break 3 hours in the marathon. I ran in my early 20s, and I ran 3:03 twice. I just missed it twice. And I thought that was a dream dead and gone. I've lost both my parents in the last 3 years. And after I lost my father last March, I decided, you know what, I'm going to give it another shot. And I ran 3 half marathons last year. And the last one was, there's like a formula that if you apply the formula to convert a half to a full, I should be able to run a sub 3 hour marathon. And so right now I'm in the training of that. And so the very non-masculine answer is, to be swift as a coursing river would be to break 3 hours in the marathon, which I hope to do on April 12th.
I think that would be freaking awesome.
Yeah.
I hope you do. I'm cheering for you to do that, because I cannot run a marathon. My mom started running them when she was in her like 50s, late 50s. So like, hey, anybody can do it at any time. And if you can break 3 hours, like, that's incredible.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do, man. And the running community is such a loving, inclusive community. So whatever your pace or body shape or health, just if you want to get involved, it's a great community to get involved with.
Good. That's good to know. And so if you're interested in finding community, maybe try and find a running group.
Mm-hmm.
You'll also find really cool stuff that comes out of them. Like, running groups can sometimes turn into things like D&D groups.
Yes.
I know because my mom does one. And it's funny that my mom is now into D&D because I was a D&D nerd when I was a kid.
We are nerds, and we embrace our nerdship.
Heck yeah. All right. Next question. How do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
How do I embody the force of a great typhoon? I try to be disciplined in whatever I do. I try to be deliberate in whatever I do. And so whether that means making sure I'm up by 5 a.m. to get to the gym by 5:05 or 4:50 a.m. to be 4:55 to be at the gym by 5 a.m. when it opens. That discipline is something that I try to just be relentless about. No matter how crappy I feel, I just make sure I get up and do it. And I love it because for the first like 10 minutes, I'm cursing myself. Like, you could be in a nice warm bed, but you're here. And then after that, I am like super thrilled that I did what I did, because it allows me to enjoy the benefits of that. And that force happens through like a compounding effort. You don't see the results after one day, 1 week, or even a month, but 3 months, 6 months, a year in, and you're just a transformed person, and it feels awesome.
Amazing. Love it. How are you as strong as a raging fire?
How am I strong as a raging fire? See, fire destroys. I'm not really the destroyer type. I don't like to destroy.
Well, let me frame this one slightly a little for
Yeah,
you. Think of more of a raging as a contained fire rather than one that is burning hot and strong,
sure.
but not wild, not out of control.
So Ramadan is starting, and the word Ramadan comes from Ramadan, which means to burn away impurities. And so part of what makes Ramadan so special is that this is a month for us to burn away the bad habits in our life, whether it's eating unhealthy, or a bad sleep habit, or just any bad habit that you have. It allows you to overcome it. And so I guess that's the way I would ask that I'm looking forward to just improving myself this month, and further refining my habits to be even more disciplined and to be a better version of myself.
Love that. Beautiful answer. Final question before you get to shamelessly promote yourself is, how are you as mysterious as the dark side of the moon?
I am actually an introvert. I don't actually like being on social media. I don't actually like uh, public speaking. There's a lot that I say 1% of what I think, and it allows me to have my own space, and I actually love that.
I love that. That's beautiful. And it's a great way to you had me fooled. I would have assumed you were an extrovert. You talk you're on here so much and you're doing so much extroverted work that it's hard to see you as an introvert. But then again, I'm also an introvert, so could
I,
be.
there's nothing I enjoy more than going on a 15-mile run without any notifications or phones, and just being in my thoughts. It's amazing.
I used to go on either bicycle rides or motorcycle rides when I was riding my motorcycle, but bicycle rides are the same as
Yeah,
you're just out there, you're just by yourself. You can do 25, 50 miles and nobody's there to bother you.
yep,
No
that's great.
phone, no nothing.
That's
And
great.
it's just your freedom.
Yep.
Um, this has been Qasim, this has been such a beautiful, wonderful interview. Thank you so much for joining me today. And yes, I even did it right. I even got your QR code up there correctly ahead of time. Is I love giving the opportunity after these twos for people to be able to promote themselves and the work that they're doing and how others can find them and support them. Before you even promote yourself, everybody, please go support and follow Qasim's work. He is incredible. This has been such a wonderful discussion, and every time I talk to him, I learn something new, and in such a teachable way. You're a good teacher. Like you're a great teacher of facts and information, and I really enjoy that. I love to learn, and I love interacting with folks who want to teach and who are open to teaching. So Qasim, thank you for teaching and providing this information.
You're too kind. Thank you for the platform. Yeah, my Substack, Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid, is just at qasimrashid.com. Um, no obligation to be a paid subscriber. It will get you zero benefit in terms of access. All my content is free. There's no paywall. If you do want to support a human rights lawyer who is doing his best to fight fascism and uphold human dignity, definitely throw a cup of coffee a month our way, but never feel any obligation. And Nick, thank you for the platform and for the opportunity and the dialogue.
Oh, absolutely. This has been so fantastic. And I've really enjoyed it. And I cannot wait to do the write up for today's show. Um, Please, everybody, it'll probably be out tomorrow, like always, as I take some time and I actually do a good write up, a little bit of a profile about the person I interviewed. So Qasim will have a wonderful little write up with some quotes that he's had and a big block quote at the beginning of something that he said. Because as Courtney said, every one of the guests on here has been quotable in so many different ways, and it's really amazing to get all of these wonderful moments from each of us, and from each man that has come on to describe this. And your discussion will help fuel more of the article series that is going to be coming out on the written side. So thank you so much for being here with me, Qasim. Thank you for everyone in the audience for being here with me. I appreciate all of you, and I look forward to seeing you all on Thursday for my next Intelligent Masculinity interview here on Sick of This Shit Publications. And like I said before, I'm Nick Paro. This is Sick of This Shit Publications. I have been joined by Qasim Rashid Esquire of Let's Address This with Qasim Rashid. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, because we're done being sick of this shit. And now